evolution is not even remotely plausible without the cosmology that is being pushed in the Copernican model. The whole idea of suns eventually spitting out, or, in the process of forming, creating planets that cool in orbit around suns, and the whole idea that all the stars that we see out there in the heavens are suns just like our sun, and likely with planets going around them just like we have planets going around our sun, supposedly. The possibility that some of those could have life on them, to me, all of this is a big setup. And one of the things that I find interesting about the idea that flat Earth is coming out now is I believe we're getting really close to some sort of disclosure event.
After all these years, it finally happened. The U.S. government has come out saying that they've recovered, quote, off-world vehicles not made of this Earth. This top-secret Pentagon report is said to confirm everything UFO researchers have been saying for years. The Roswell crash, Bob Lazar, Area 51, and Skinwalker Ranch, all confirmed by actual declassified U.S. government documents. Right now, we're going to take a look at some of the latest articles coming out on this matter. On July 23, 2020, Tucker Carlson shocked the world when he said this on his live Fox News broadcast.
This is a Fox News alert. There are new findings tonight in the search for extraterrestrial life. The New York Times reporting that a secretive Pentagon unit tasked with investigating UFO sightings is quite likely releasing some of its findings soon. And those findings could be stunning, particularly for people who have doubted the existence. The Pentagon has been conducting classified hearings on UFOs for more than a decade. We know very little about what they found. But apparently, just recovered are off-world vehicles not made on this Earth. That's a direct quote.
The following day, multiple articles were released going into more detail. The Intelligencer reports on July 24, 2020, quote, the Pentagon has reportedly found off-world vehicles not made of this Earth. Also, Fox News releases an article entitled, quote, with Pentagon UFO unit in the spotlight, reports mention off-world vehicles not made of this Earth. Let's take a closer look at this Fox News article. Quote, a long-hidden UFO investigative unit within the Pentagon will make some of its findings public, according to the New York Times report. The unit, which is now part of the Office of Naval Intelligence, has spent over a decade discussing mysterious events in classified briefings, according to the news outlet. A government contractor told the Times that he gave a classified briefing to the Department of Defense in March, describing retrievals from, quote, off-world vehicles not made of this Earth. The Unidentified Aerial Phenomenon Task Force at the Office of Naval Intelligence was described in a Senate Intelligence Committee report last month. The unit standardizes collection and reporting on unidentified aerial phenomenon, any links they have to adversarial foreign governments, and the threat they pose to U.S. military assets and installations, the report says. However, the committee remains concerned that there is no unified, comprehensive process within the federal government for collecting and analyzing intelligence on unidentified aerial phenomena, despite the potential threat, it added. The New York Times reports that a small group of government officials and scientists believe that objects of, quote, undetermined origin have crashed to Earth and been retrieved, including former Senator Harry Reid. While some have been found to be man-made materials, there are question marks over others. The publication cites Eric W. Davis, an astrophysicist who worked as a subcontractor and a consultant for the Pentagon UFO program. Davis, who now works for defense contractor Aerospace Corporation, said he also gave briefings on the recovery of unexplained objects to staff members of the Senate Armed Services Committee and the Senate Intelligence Committee on October 21st and October 23rd, 2019, respectively. The article goes on to say, in speaking with the New York Times, Reid said he believes the government and the private sector may have retrieved materials from unidentified objects. After looking into this, I came to the conclusion that there were reports, some were substantive, some not so substantive, that there were actual materials that the government and the private sector had in their possession, Reid said in an interview. Reid's comments are the latest from the former lawmaker. In June 2019, he told Nevada's KNPR that he wished lawmakers would hold public hearings into what the military knows. He said they would be surprised how the American public would accept it, Reid said during the wide-ranging interview. But why now? Why is the government releasing all this info right now? Why do you think they're so confident people will accept it? Could it have anything to do with the inundation of propaganda material such as ancient aliens and the like?
Yeah, absolutely. Ancient aliens. They're always pushing the Anunnaki and whatnot, that there are ancient alien creators.
Evolution has run its course. It's gone completely bankrupt. So even people like Professor Richard Dawkins saying, well, intelligence design, is likely the way it could come about, but it would come about in the following way, that some ancient civilization out there in the universe, who itself allegedly evolved from some sort of Darwinian evolution type of scenario, reached a high level of sophistication and came here and seeded our world with the mechanism that made evolution possible here. Of course, it just keeps pushing the problem further out. How did that other, if it requires intelligent design to kickstart evolution, then how did that other allegedly advanced civilization out there evolve? I mean, sooner or later, you're going to get to a first cause, and that first cause is going to be God. But this narrative is being pushed on us that ancient aliens have been here before. They were likely our creators, or at least helped kickstart life, and they're coming back. UFO and alien abduction scenarios are being reported exponentially more and more every year. And you got people like Stephen M. Greer out there saying, hey, disclosure is imminent. It's just around the corner. It's going to happen. Although he's been saying some stuff that's rather interesting lately, that he even believes there's going to be a counterfeit version of it, that we have the technology right now, the human beings could fake UFOs with our own technology, make people believe that it's alien spacecraft, but it could very well just be, black budget DARPA type projects, developed in Area 51, human engineered aircraft that are being used by our government or the governments of the world to deceive people that it's really aliens. He's warning about that.
The military term, so you know it, is a false INW, or a deceptive INW, indication and warning. And it's basically like the Gulf of Tonkin event in Vietnam. You basically exaggerate or hoax an event that then manipulates policymakers. So this was the ultimate takedown of official disclosure, which was about to happen in 1989. Got it? 26 years ago, November 1989. So here we are in 2015, and it took a lot to piece all this together, and I began to look into what the electronics were with this, and what kind of technologies they might have. And one bit of insight that the Prince had, he said, so he told me that the reason he was funding the abduction groups is that he was convinced that there was an existential threat from outer space. That's been the Sub Rosa plan since the 56. And that he wanted people to hate the aliens enough to pay the blood and treasure of World War III. And he also wanted it to be eschatological, where it would result in the end of the world, so that Christ would return and the good folks would go up in a flying saucer, I guess, with Christ. Now, this is what he was telling me. I'm just listening, and I'm going, whoa, this is like, woohoo. And he was completely convinced that this is what needed to happen. This sort of end of the world eschatology is the study of the end of the world event, and that's why he was putting so much money in and providing so much funding to Mack and David Jacobs and Bud Hopkins and all this. And he told me, he says, I'm going to stop funding John Mack because he's become too positive about contact, and I only want to fund people who are going to put things out there that scare people and make them hate the aliens. He said this. So I went, oh boy. Now this is connecting a dot that all of you better listen to very carefully. It's the last thing you learn today. And that is that there is an overarching agenda that was hatched in the 50s. Remember that psychological warfare document and its value? That was hatched in between 53 and 56 to create the specter of a threat from outer space that does not exist. Wernher von Braun stated on his deathbed, and we have the testimony of his assistant, that and said, they will first have the Cold War, then we decided there would be nations of concern, then global terrorism. We have this testimony from before 9/11. Then that would be followed by threats from outer space. They'll start talking about asteroids and things of this sort, but the ultimate one they're going to play is the alien threat, and it's all a lie, and it's all a hoax.
When I was a corporate manager of Fairchild Industries in 1974 through 77, I met the late Dr. Wernher von Braun in early 74. At that time, von Braun was dying of cancer, but he assured me that he would live a few more years in order to tell me about the game that was being played, that game being the effort to weaponize space, to control the Earth from space and space itself. Von Braun's purpose in life during the last years of his life, his dying years, was to educate the public and decision makers about why space-based weapons are a dumb, dangerous, destabilizing, too costly, unnecessary, unworkable, undesirable idea. The strategy that Wernher von Braun taught me was that first the Russians are going to be considered to be the enemy. In fact, when I met him in 74, they were the enemy, the identified enemy. We were told that they had killer satellites. We were told that they were coming to get us and control us, the dirty commies, that whole story. First, the Russians were the enemy against whom we're going to build space-based weapons. Then terrorists would be identified, and that was soon to follow. We heard a lot about terrorism. Then we were going to identify third world country crazies. We now call them nations of concern. But he said that would be the third enemy against whom we would be needing to build space-based weapons. And the next enemy was asteroids. Now at this point, he kind of chuckled the first time he said it. Asteroids, against asteroids we're going to build space-based weapons. So it was funny then. And the funniest one of all was against what he called aliens, extraterrestrials. That would be the final card. And over and over and over during the 4 years that I knew him and was giving his speeches for him, he would bring up that last card. And remember, Carol, the last card is the alien card. We're going to have to build space-based weapons against aliens, and all of it, he said, is a lie. Well, at the time, I kind of laughed when he said asteroids, and when he said extraterrestrials, I knew I wasn't going to deal with that subject. And now we hear in the news just today, this week, that they've slid in another enemy. Only this time we're going to protect our satellites. In other words, we have to have some reason to spend these trillions, to waste these dollars on a space-based weapon system, and they're all lies. And I will testify before the Congress under oath about everything I have said and more. Thank you.
So, I mean, we can take it or leave it. I don't know what to make of this. I certainly don't trust Wernher von Braun. This person seems to be a credible person. She's giving a testimony that, I mean, we can only assume is true unless proven otherwise. But what if Wernher von Braun at the end of his life was making a confession of sorts and trying to warn her and telling her to tell everybody else, and perhaps warning others that, look, what's coming, whatever it is that they may have had information or been privy to, is fake. It's a fraud. It's not real as it pertains to visitations from outer space. I mean, maybe there's a good reason why he had whoever he left behind after he died had them put Psalm 19:1 on his tombstone, of all things, and for Wernher von Braun, of all people, right? Psalm 19:1 describing the firmament. It's definitely one of those things that make you go,
But in order for the lie to work, they have had to create a body of disinformation, false information, and frightening scenarios, and actual events that would be convincing to our policymakers like Reagan, convincing to the average person, and to the UFO public that consumes videos, entertainment consoles, movies, etc. And that has been the 50 to 60 year plan. Don't forget that no less a figure than Douglas MacArthur in his last address to the Congress said World War III will be interplanetary. So they have been wanting to provoke an interplanetary conflict for as long as I've been alive, and I'm no spring chicken. And, all right, so this gets into a huge problem of how people consume information and can be manipulated through fear. Because if you look at the roots of human warfare, the early days and even today, it's people abducting a tribe's women, raping them, abusing them sexually, etc., and so on. This is all stuff that they are simulating and saying that the ETs are doing through these abduction scenarios. It is 100% being done by military special operations that are this paramilitary force. And this is the deep end of the pond. Now, when I discovered this back in 1994, now this is 21 years on, I was told by someone in the intelligence community, don't talk about that, because that's what's really dangerous for you. And it's also what will discredit you, and it will also cause them to hate you the most, because you're defanging their whole war plan. The next big war is not terrorism, it's interstellar. And if you expose that it's a hoax, it takes all the steam out of their plan.
More and more in the last few years, he's been talking about a counterfeit alien disclosure that be 100% orchestrated by human beings in order to push forth an agenda. Now, of course, he's not a flat earther. He believes in the spinning globular Earth model and that there are ancient aliens out there. And he believes we need to reach out to them and, shake their hand and say, hey, let's be friends, and all that good stuff. But, to me, I don't believe, even before I got into the flat Earth, I didn't believe in ancient aliens anyway, or aliens in other worlds. I believed in all along that we're dealing with fallen angel activity and demonic activity and things of that nature. And yet still, we have to acknowledge that we've had constant media bombardment, both in, sort of mainstream news as well as in movies and pop culture and all kinds of stuff, always pushing this alien agenda, people from other worlds out there. So the thing about flat Earth that really intrigues me is it nullifies all of it. If we're in a terrarium, well, there's a creator. And so if there's a creator, then immediately evolution is demolished. And the whole notion of ancient aliens goes out the window too, because everything above us is way closer and way smaller than what we've been taught. So anyway, that's my take on the likelihood that the Copernican spinning heliocentric globular Earth model could very likely be a massively huge part, if not the central part, of the strong delusion written about in Scripture concerning the last days.